we'll start. Just a quick update on Scott Peters. For the information for you all, my predecessor, our former chairman, is recovering from a heart transplant. I was with him at a picnic on Monday. I was with him at coffee this morning. He's home from the Rehab Institute. Heart, mind, spirit are all very good. Kidneys, right arm and hand, overall strength, still works in progress. He's in physical therapy. He's in dialysis 2 or 3 days a week. And getting the use of this hand back. But basically, everything's moving in the right direction. We're feeling very good.
Thank you for the update.
My guess is that sooner or later he will show up here. I don't know how long it'll take him.
He'll wait for a big project. Sure. He'll wait for a big project.
Yeah. Let's see. We've got a quorum. We could begin, unless you want to hold a few minutes for Andy.
Sure. We can go on.
Okay, let's go. It is Wednesday, September 9th, 7:02 p.m. This is the Plan Commission of the City of Evanston. I am Jim Ford. We have a quorum. I will call the meeting to order. You have the agenda in front of you. Are there any changes or additions that need to be made to the agenda? Is there anyone in the public who wants to speak on any of the issues that are in front of us? On the building height one? Would you like us to reverse the order of items, Jess, or don't you care? Okay. In which case, hearing no comments, the agenda will stand. We probably should include an item called welcomes because we have several to make. First, I want to welcome Patrick Brown, who is our newest and 9th commissioner. We are now full strength. Patrick's a lifelong Evanstonian and works for McHugh Construction in pre-construction planning. So he brings some skills to us that we don't have. So we're glad to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
You all have had communication with Megan Jones, but I don't know whether you've met her. Megan is now the community planner. So at some point in the near future, she will become my right hand. Megan was in the Economic Development Department before she came here, and prior to that worked in the city of Chicago and the city of Carbondale. So she's had some experience with university towns. So we're glad to have you here. And finally, the Overflow Crowd. This is a group of students who are beginning master's program in journalism at Medill, coming to us from all over the world. And for some reason decided that seeing a plan commission in action would be a good part of their orientation, and we were the nearest plan commission. So we're glad to have you with us tonight. Hello, Counselor.
How are you doing?
First order of business, the minutes of July 8th. Are there any additions or corrections to be made to the minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Lewis, seconded.
Second.
Dubin, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. The minutes stand approved as presented. They surprised me. I worked hard and just couldn't do it. Okay, then, we will move on to the 2 substantive items before us. Both of these have been noticed as public hearings. And I'll just I'll go briefly through the process that we will use in hearing these. In both of these cases, the staff are functioning as the petitioner. So staff will make a brief presentation of the proposal and their recommendation. We will then question staff. If any members of the public wish to question staff, they may do so. Any members of the public who wish to present testimony may then do so, and we will cross-examine them. That being done, the petitioners may make a brief final statement if they wish. We will close the public record at that point and proceed to commission deliberation. If a member of the public who meets a distance requirement wishes us to do so, we can grant one continuance of the case to a date certain. No further legal notice is necessary with respect to that continuance. I'll swear Jess when we get to her case. So the first case before us, 15 PLND 0073, a text amendment clarifying the distance requirement between payday loan or consumer loan establishments. Demir, you're going to give the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just real quick, this first case in front of us is merely an amendment. It's just a simple change to the ordinance to make it more consistent with the rest of the code. Basically, the current zoning ordinance includes a definition of payday loans or consumer loan establishments within the definition section, and that definition section is here on the screen. And the last part that's outlined in the red talks about the fact that payday loans are required to be a minimum of 1,000 feet apart. So typically, this is not where one would look for any type of these land use regulations within the definition section. Usually, one would look into the individual zoning districts where the particular use is allowed to identify where it's allowed. Is it allowed as a permitted use or special use? Are there any other specific regulations about that? So this proposed text amendment would really add that language that's here underlined next to the name for payday loan or consumer loan establishment that is listed as a special use within the C2 commercial district. That's really the only district where payday loans are allowed. So we're just proposing to add that language that it is allowed for a minimum of 1,000 feet from another similar establishment, and that's measured property line to property line. We're really not proposing any other changes. There are no changes, obviously, to the current regulations. The 1,000-foot requirement will stay the same. So we believe that this would make it easier for potential businesses to identify and find out about the requirements between the uses. And it also makes it consistent with other similar requirements that we have for other types of uses. Most notably, recently, discussion we had about firearm ranges. We added a provision in there next to the firearm range in each district where they're allowed, that they have to be here 350 feet apart. So this will make it consistent and will avoid any confusion with any potential applicants. These are the standards for approval of any amendment. In this case, we believe the standard 7 satisfied. The last particular standard about public facilities that usually refers to the map amendments and rezonings. So we believe that the proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan. It will, as I mentioned, it will make the regulations consistent across the code and will ensure that we allow for changing uses that are compatible with the character of neighborhoods and commercial districts. So without going into further detail, that's really the total presentation.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Lutinovich? Hello, Andy.
Is it the intent to leave the prior location definition defined in 2 places?
We were not proposing to change that. I mean, we could if the Plan Commission feels it's unnecessary. It's good to have it in more than one place, I suppose, in case one looks in different sections and stuff. So we were just going to add the clarification under C2 district.
Or could we add something that says for definition C, and then you would have to keep on modifying, bringing both up to date when you made modifications or something?
Does it appear in 2 locations in the other instances? I think one of the other instances is firearm ranges, yes?
Yes. So
does it appear in the definition and in the
what I will try to show is typically for the firearm ranges, that's the latest one that we did. So we've added a whole new section of the code under Chapter 4 that deals with firearm ranges because there are other requirements that pertain to firearm ranges. They have to get a license, they have to be in certain specific districts, and they have to be certain distance away from schools and parks, etc. So where firearm range is allowed, it says a minimum of 350 feet from so-and-so, and then it also refers to that particular section under Chapter 4 that has additional requirements. So what you will see throughout the code is that if a use is listed as allowed, and there's some specific regulations about that, it would state as allowed under section so-and-so in the Chapter 4 that deals with whatever that use is, if it's aquaponics or neighborhood gardens or residential care homes or transitional treatment facilities, or a lot of these uses have specific requirements for them, and they're referred to that section within the use.
So is there a strict parallel, another provision that is strictly parallel to this one, in which the distance requirement appears twice?
That I can think of, I don't think so.
Kind of in addition to what Chairman Ford just said, are there others where it is missing and staff would be thinking of doing the same thing that we're trying to do tonight and try to bunch them up so we don't have to go through that again?
We thought about that, we didn't find it.
Okay.
Nothing as simple as this, and we've consulted with legal. Generally, the city council prefers to see these separately, particular item, issues one by one. We thought about combining this with the next case about the heights because that change is also very minimal. But the preference was to have them separate and process them as separate text amendments.
I think the big difference is that in this one, we're not changing any regulation. That's significant.
Yeah.
We're just writing it in a different place.
Right.
Other questions? Somebody want to offer a motion?
I move.
Approval of the staff recommendation as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion?
I still think that, we spent a long time when we were doing the rules for these procedures, eliminating duplicate references and making it so there was only one reference and one source that needed to be changed, so to avoid the possibility of conflict, in the future, should someone not realize that it's in multiple places. And I think it's managerially difficult to maintain, multiple definitions through time as time goes on. So I would prefer to see something that, if you want to see it in two places, that there's a reference that says, for the definition or for the distance requirement, see whatever section in it. And then it's always can just be referenced in one place and modified in one place.
What we can do is we can eliminate that particular wording under definition.
In the definition?
Yeah, and just not even mention that. And obviously, when one is looking at where it's allowed, so we would just eliminate that 1,000 foot so that it's not redundant, that it's not located in multiple places, and then we would instead put it in the section where they're allowed.
It can be either way. I think that's a really good point. For plan development in that same provision, it says subject to the requirements of section 61019. So we can do, and for the sake of consistency, we could say subject to the distance requirements as delineated in section.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. Then if you changed it to 800 feet, then you only change it to 800 feet.
Then you just change one rather than.
Commissioners Belisle and Dubin, are you comfortable with an amendment to that effect?
Yes.
I am, yes.
Okay. Then the motion is to recommend the amendment as recommended by staff with the further recommendation that the definition be amended to conform, and you know what we mean by that. Okay? Questions or discussion on that? We'll do this on a roll call since it's going to council.
All right, we have a motion to approve with the condition to modify. Commissioner Belisle?
Yeah.
Commissioner Dubin?
Yes.
Commissioner Lewis?
Yes.
Commissioner Pagozzi?
Yes.
Commissioner Brown?
Yes.
Chairman Ford?
Yes. 6 ayes, no nays, the motion is approved. Thank you. Case number 15, PLND 0074, a zoning ordinance text amendment to specify the height requirements for planned developments in the D3 Downtown Core Development District. Again, the same procedure. Staff will present the proposal. We will question staff, and the public may question staff. We will then invite the public to testify. Cross-examine the public, and we will then close the public record. So, you're on.
Thank you, Chairman Ford. So the second case is a little bit more substantial. It deals with the height requirement for planned development in the D3 district. So the current regulations, as you would expect, there's a general height restriction for every zoning district. And in particular for the downtown districts, we got 4 downtown districts, D1, 2, 3, and 4. They all have their own height regulations. For every one of these, in the general height regulation, it states that up to 4 levels of parking or 40 feet, whichever is less, does not count towards the general building height. However, when you switch over to a section about planned developments and talks about site development allowances, that there's a provision that says, except for the planned development in D3, that provision for 4 levels of parking to exclude that from the building height requirement, except for the D3, that still applies. So in the D3 district, the planned development does have to include, if they have parking, they do have to include that in their building height requirement or calculation. So staff has identified that as something that's inconsistent, somewhat confusing, not only to developers and public, but it's also confusing to staff. And we felt that this would be a good time to try to address that concern and inconsistency, considering that there is no potential development of anything like that out there right now. And I also want to point out that all other downtown districts do allow, under general height regulations and for all planned developments, that if there is 4 levels of parking or 40 feet, whichever less, that those 4 levels of parking can be excluded from the building height calculation. So D3 again is the only section. This is that section from the zoning ordinance that deals with the height. As you can see, that's 611.48. That's the maximum building height in D3 is 85 feet, and then the next 3 sentences talk about the fact that you can exclude that. The problem is a vast majority of developments downtown have to be processed as planned developments. Simply because of the scale of development downtown, you're going to build a building that's over 20,000 square feet, and per code, any construction over 20,000 square feet has to be processed as planned development. So in essence, right there, projects in the D3, which is the downtown core, kind of are penalized for if they do want to provide parking on site. And then this is the section of the code that deals with planned developments for the downtown section, 611.110. And the subsection C talks about development allowances. Under 1, it talks about the height increase. In the D1, you can do 24 feet. In the D2, you can get an increase of 43 feet. In the D3, you can get 85 feet generally, but then if you have a more wider lot, more than 95 feet, you can actually get up to 220 feet. And then in the D4, the additional height is 40 feet. And then that little provision right below that table is what's in the code. It says, except in the D3 district, that the 4 levels of parking can be excluded. So this is the map of the downtown that indicates, they're all in kind of light blue color, but the D3 district is, no, it's not there.
There's two.
But, so this is the boundary of the D3 district here. It goes along south of Davis Street down to Grove, over here at Sherman, and sort of southeast of the Davis Street stop, and then there's another section over here centered around Church Street. It's west of the Metro tracks, and then as you can see, it kind of extends over here all the way to Chicago. D2 is this sort of lighter blue color that's a little bit on the outside, and then the D4 and then the D1 are the sort of the outer districts for the downtown. They're used sort of as a transitional districts between the surrounding residential districts. As you can see here, R6s, R5s, the university districts, and R5 on the north side, etc. And then the big void here in the middle is the research park. That's still sort of a leftover from the late 80s and early 90s. And we do have a plan to try to rezone that at some point next year. And it will be probably a very, a mixture of, D4s and D1s and D3s probably. So this is just a map to kind of put it in perspective. As I mentioned, the D3 is really reserved for the core of the downtown. So going back to what each individual downtown district allows, currently the height, as you can see, is about 42 feet in D1 and D2, 85 in the D3 and D4 for residential, and then the D4, without the residential, 85 feet, but if there's a residential component in the D4 district, the maximum height is 105 feet. And then the site development allowances, what the 4 levels of parking really do is, as you can see, if a development includes 4 levels of parking, you can actually, the site development allowance, you can get to 106 feet in the D1 district, 125 feet in the D2, and then 170 feet in the D3, unless you have a lot that's wider than 95 feet, then you can get to 220, but those 4 levels of parking are excluded. And then in the D4, if there's no residential component, up to 166 feet. If there is a residential component on the outskirts of the downtown in the D4, then the maximum height with parking would be 185 feet. And that's one thing that really raised the flag for us, is that the outer and the outskirts of District D4, where you will see residential primarily, would actually allow a taller structure than what you would allow downtown at your core. So that was one of the things that we noticed, and we said, well, this doesn't seem to be right. So both the comprehensive plan and the downtown plan both want the highest density, the tallest buildings sort of in the core, away from more residential areas in the outskirts. So that's really what triggered this. And what's the proposed amendment is really just the elimination of those 5 words in this section 612 and 110, to eliminate that except in the D3 district, which would then mean that for all downtown districts, the 4 levels of parking can be excluded for the height calculation. Excuse me, there's another section in the definition that also talks about, kind of similar to the previous case, the definition also of the building height refers to the fact that the plan developments, the 4 levels cannot be excluded. So we would eliminate that section too. Going back to standards, we do believe that standards for the approval of amendments are satisfied. We believe that this proposal is consistent with both the comprehensive plan and the downtown plan for Evanston. It really encourages compatible mix of land uses and enhances the economic vitality of the downtown with a mixture of uses and the highest density closest to the transit stops. As I mentioned, the downtown plan was adopted in 2009. Does call for more predictable and sensible development regulations, and this particular provision, making it inconsistent with the other downtowns, is something that we've heard is kind of confusing, so this would address that. And it's also consistent with both the comp plan and the downtown plan to allow for highest density and the tallest heights in the core of the downtown. By making this amendment, this would make all the downtown districts same in terms of how the height is calculated. So it would make it for a more equitable review and approval process for all planned developments throughout the downtown districts. This should not have any adverse effects on the values of adjacent properties. What we've seen, the problem, most of these planned developments, as you probably know, most of the time they do not provide on-site parking. Parking is really expensive. Developers, the idea of the downtown districts that was developed in the early 90s, 1993, came from the 1989 downtown plan that really called for a creation of new downtown districts. It used to be B1 and B2 throughout the downtown. And the effort was to encourage density, to encourage new development, mixed uses, and the core of the downtown was centered around, in the downtown plan for 1989, was centered around the train stations. And then later on, in 1993, when the zoning districts were drafted, the boundaries between the districts really kind of jot in and out. So it's really hard for any use or developer to really understand that across the street is D2 and across the street is D3, and there's different regulations for that. So this should address that concern. And what we've also done, we've done some research about what other cities are doing, and we found that most other cities encourage parking underground, and they provide bonuses for developments to increase in height, increase in density if you provide parking underground. For Evanston, in this proximity to the lake, it is extremely expensive to put parking underground. We're having a hard time convincing developers to put even one level of parking underground. It's just cost prohibitive. So instead, and this is probably why the ordinance included this in the first place, to give the credit, if they do provide on-site parking, to give them the credit that those levels of parking up to 4 levels do not count. Now this bears on the question, why was this provision included in here? Because it was clearly deliberate, it was on purpose that only the D3 district plan developments should be excluded. So we tried to find that as much as we can, and really the best thing that we found was, I read through the 1989 downtown plan that led to the creation of the downtown districts. And as I mentioned, the 1989 plan called for the core to be centered around the transit stops, and to make that more of a mixed-use district. And it really called for a comprehensive policy and regulations when it comes to circulation and parking. It really called for construction of multiple parking structures where new developments can share the parking and they don't have to provide it on site. There was also concern about, and that's why the parking structure, Maple Avenue Park Garage was then built in the late 90s. The Sherman Plaza, the whole complex for the parking was also built in the early 2000s. And I think the parking structure over on Church in Chicago was also built around that time. So the city did really do and follow the 1989 plan to make a more comprehensive, trying to address the parking through these parking structures and relieve the pressure from the developments, and that's why there has been so much development downtown. One other thing that I'll point out is that the 1989 plan really was somewhat concerned about loss of ground floor retail uses, and that's why the code includes a requirement that if there is a parking structure in one of these buildings, the ground floor has to be devoted to retail. So if in the D3 core there are developments that propose 1, 2, or even 4 levels of parking, we would obviously require that they provide retail on the ground to address that concern. So that's the best sort of what we found in terms of why this was included in here. It was clearly done on purpose, but we felt that it's just inconsistent. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. You can actually build taller structures on the outskirts of the downtown. I don't think that was the intent of both the zoning ordinance and the plans. So we hope that this kind of can address that for future projects. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Concerns or questions? Let me take your questions. Go ahead.
In this mine, is this, so So historically, over the past year or so, we've approved a few what are called transit-oriented developments, and I've heard you speak eloquently to eliminating parking. So is this consistent or in your mind or inconsistent with our, and as you mentioned, this zone was around the unique situation where we have two parallel, I've heard this coming out of your research before, that this is a unique place in the urban area that both Metro Rail and Elevated both have parallel stations, and this is ideal for transit-oriented developments, which is eliminating parking and encouraging alternate means of transportation. So is this, in your mind, consistent as a planner?
Well, that's a totally different question. Should a development provide parking on site in the core like this is a totally different debate. The reason we're bringing this forward is because of the inconsistency within the downtown, within the districts. Not so much about do we want to encourage parking on new developments. We hear consistently issues from the surrounding property owners in Planning Commission has heard those in previous cases that when a developer proposes 1-to-1 parking ratio, which usually does not satisfy the code, for a 200-unit apartment building or condo, that means 200 parking spaces, and they have to go somewhere. And that's really the least amount that we've sort of approved. If they don't provide it on site, then we ask them to lease it off site somewhere else. So while we do believe that a reduced amount of parking is adequate and should be provided in the downtown area, parking needs to be provided, and both the neighbors and the businesses and if it's going to be a condo, for future buyers, generally there should be some parking provided. What this really does is, because they cannot go underground and they put it above grade, whatever that is, 1 level, maybe 2 levels, it is excluded from that height the same way it would be excluded on the outskirts or anywhere else.
So is it too difficult to write this comprehensively, where you address both issues with the ability to provide greater height but reduce the amount of parking requirement for a district like this, which is, instead of, because what we are doing, if we don't do that, is encouraging more automobile parking, and we're almost saying it's mandatory because of the way the code is written. So shouldn't we be, looking at it?
One thing that the city staff is looking at right now, we have engaged with the RTA, Regional Transportation Authority, on a study to amend and modify our parking requirements. Right now, they're based on the number of bedrooms, and so if there's a residential project downtown anywhere, the number of parking spaces required is based on the bedroom count. So we're currently working with a consultant to do a comprehensive overhaul of the parking requirements, at least around the transit stops. What that's going to end up being, I really have no idea. It's too early in the process. Hopefully, it'll come back to Plan Commission at some time before the end of the year. But it may come to a point that the entire downtown is called a TOD area, where we can, require a reduced number of parking. Maybe it's going to focus on, around all transit stops. But that's one element that we're looking at parking. But it's just it's to combine this particular modification with other changes to the zoning ordinance. At this point, we didn't feel that it could, pass muster.
I agree. It's a complete study in its own right.
I think I want to come back to that. I think this line of questioning has become, in the finest sense, argumentative, and I want to come back to it. Are there questions of clarification yet here?
I'd like to know what other towns that you looked at with a similar core district and variations in building height. Who did you compare us to?
I'll turn it over to Megan. I think you did some research. Do you have with you?
We looked at Cambridge, Massachusetts, Boulder, Chicago, Pasadena, California. There's one more I think I'm forgetting.
Oak Park, I believe it was.
Oak Park, yes. For some of those areas, especially the ones that have more rough terrain, mountainous terrain, there was a very strict height restriction, and parking was basically just included in that height restriction. But for the other areas, like Chicago, there was no height restriction, but the parking was definitely encouraged to go underground, and different bonuses were given if that underground parking was provided.
Other questions for Demir? Does the public have questions? Jess, if you come up here, I have been promised that this microphone will pick your voice up.
I'm not sure I have questions, I mean, have comments.
Okay, if the public has no questions, then we will invite the public to comment. I know you hate this, but you're testifying under oath, so I have to swear you.
Oh, yeah.
Promise to tell the truth in this proceeding.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Jessica Feldman.
As probably the only person in the room who actually went to all the downtown plan committee meetings.
Wrong.
He came to some too.
Some, all.
Okay,
All.
folks,
All,
let the record show that,
two of us
okay.
attended, okay. But I was the only public who was here.
That's true.
There were many publics. And I was thinking back to what the reasoning was, that there was a difference in this anomaly with D3. And as I recall, it had to do with not putting the making sure that the Plan Commission and the Council would have discretion to deal with a very complex plan development. The plan developments in D3 are complex by nature, just because of where they are. I know that the department would like to have it improved because it improved a complex process, but it's designed to be a complex process because the buildings you're talking about are complex and they have a big impact. And I am concerned about chipping away at plans that took 2.5 years.
2, 3, 2.5, and 2 years in committee, a year.
With a lot of community input, a lot of community involvement. And when you determine at the staff level a set thing for you remove the discretion from the Plan Commission and the ability to negotiate more with the developer in the public view, with the public having some input. And since I'm public, I'm all for that continuing as much as possible. And some of that has happened already, and I would like to have the downtown plan have a chance to maybe get approved and actually pay attention to.
Excellent point, Jessica.
Okay.
If I may follow that, Mr. Chairman, with a comment. If you're, are you finished?
Oh,
Are there questions from Ms. Feldman? Stuart, do you want to frame a statement as a question?
Is there any thought given by staff to codifying the downtown plan?
Let's come back to that.
that's right.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, are there questions for Jessica? No. Okay. Demir, you want to... If there are no questions for the public, then the staff may make whatever concluding comments it wants to make, and then we will proceed.
Sure, and I'd be happy to answer any questions as we move along.
I'm sorry.
Excuse me, sir. Because I see on the website that B3 is not only for the commercial use, there will also be some residences. So I'm just wondering, will this change affect the neighborhood there?
here.
We are not proposing any changes to the uses that are allowed in the D3 district. Whatever uses we allow, and that's a mix of commercial, residential, any of those uses. So there should be no impact in terms of the character of the neighborhoods. And I was going to touch back on the heights of these planned developments that the city has allowed the last 10, 20 years. And generally, these planned developments always ask for site development allowance, and they exceed the maximum height either way. So there, as I mentioned, in regards to the standards, there should be no change to the character of the downtown because we're not changing any of the regulations.
When we talk about residences here, you understand that we are talking about apartments. We're talking about high-rise buildings with apartments, not small single-family homes.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Just to go back to what Ms. Feldman had indicated about the downtown plan, as some of you may recall, the downtown plan was a maybe 2-3 year process that ultimately was approved. The plan itself was approved in 2009. So the plan included a number of recommendations, the last one of which was a draft zoning change for the entire downtown. That draft was to split the downtown districts, the current 4 downtown districts, into even more, 9 districts. So then, after the downtown plan was adopted, the change to the zoning for the downtown area actually went through the Plan Commission as a text amendment. And once it went through the Plan Commission, it did not go through the City Council. It seems, from what I've found out, there's been no appetite on the City Council to change the zoning into even more districts, like I said, from 4 to 9. Now, the changes that were adopted, I should say, they were recommended for approval by the Plan Commission that reflect the draft of the plan. For the downtown core, the core was going to be divided into 3 districts. So the D3 would have been sort of 3 districts. By right, the height would have been allowed to go to 275 feet. Then with bonuses, it would go up to 385 feet. So once that got through the recommendation from the Plan Commission, it really never was approved by the City Council for whatever reason. So to make a comprehensive, to answer your question, Commissioner Opdyke, to do a comprehensive overhaul of the downtown districts, there just has not been the direction from the City Council to do that for staff. So the reason we're bringing this up is because it's at least in our opinion, simply a change to make it more consistent across the downtown districts. And in absence of any sort of direction from the City Council to do a larger overhaul consistent with that draft of the plan, staff we're not gonna propose that at any time.
For the downtown plan to be codified, the City Council would have to go to work. They would have to go to work and understand this plan, which obviously they don't.
Commissioner Mills.
Can I, Amir, I have a couple of questions on how this limits the ability of the Plan Commission to either allow height or not height. So because these are all planned developments, and this is only saying that by right, you get the 4 stories. Is it something that because it's a planned development, it could be approved as a development, and that's going back to this idea of allowing more discretion to the Plan Commission to either yay or nay density per the specific location that it's at. I'm not probably forming that.
No, I think I understand what you mean. This particular amendment will have no impact on how Plan Commission handles their project. And I honestly doubt that it will have any impact on developers coming forward. Because if they have a plan to include 1 or 2 levels of parking, they're going to include it. If that height stands at 150 feet, it's 150 feet. The only question that it's going to be is, does the code allow, say in the D3 district, if their particular project is 180 feet, right now that would be over the maximum site development allowance, or is it going to be within that maximum site development allowance? Either way, the Plan Commission will consider that, and ultimately the City Council will consider that proposal. The question is really how far off from the maximum that's allowed that proposal is going to be. And as you probably know, pretty much every single development that comes across our desks, requires some sort of site development allowance, and their height exceeds the maximum. So.
Yeah, they have to make their equation balance.
There's some about this that I'm trying to understand this from the developer's logic. Parking is not a significant revenue producing project for the developer, right? So what is the incentive to a developer in the downtown core? The developer isn't there to generate height, he's there to generate rentable space. And it seems to me, isn't it the case that this provision adds nothing to his ability to generate rentable space? All it does is move the rentable space up in the air if he's willing to put in parking, which from an economic standpoint may not make sense. Have I missed something?
Not sure.
Is that a question, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a question. My question is, am I wrong here?
Well, so what controls density, I guess, is the question.
Maybe as an
So
architect can
Jim
answer
is
this.
saying you're moving the density up in the air.
Yeah.
Right, so there's allowable building area for use, and the parking is the amenity that's for sellability or whatever. So
okay.
is that bulk really just lifted up in the air, or is it allowing an actual increase in
Bulk-
FAR or something?
Right, the FAR does not include parking. So parking is not used towards calculation of floor area ratio. Right.
Yeah.
In essence, really, if somebody wants to build 85-foot tall building, that's the maximum height allowed today, and they have to provide a certain number of parking spaces. And if they have, they can't go underground, so they have to put it on the first and second floor. That brings them up, if it's 10 feet per floor, then it gets to 105 feet of a building height. So now all of a sudden they have a site development allowance. They need a height variance because they had to provide parking that the code requires. That's really what it boils down to.
Okay.
And we're restricting with setbacks requirements also,
Of course,
ability
absolutely.
to build. And we want those, we want to encourage the setbacks.
So we're creating a conflict for the developer because one part of the code says he has to provide parking, and the other part of the code says it has to come out of his pocket in effect.
Right,
Okay.
parking is a huge part of doing any analysis on a piece of property in terms of what you can, the footprint that will allow, and then how are you going to resolve the mandate for parking, which is the law. So this to me gives the developer more tools to build a smarter building, so that we're not just maximizing the FAR of the footprint and swallowing up the entire parcel with built environment.
So the Maple development was something like that, where they said, we'll develop it low, build
Right.
100% of the site all the way up for 8 stories, or we'll do the setbacks and increase the height and ask for the restriction, which was a much more desirable, outcome for every can't say that.
I think it would have eliminated the height restriction, and it would have encouraged them. I think it would have given us the city a better tool to encourage them to provide adequate parking or more parking.
Oh, I see, that one didn't have parking.
Because they were locked in by a height, and there's only so much parking one could put into a structure like that before it becomes infeasible to build.
Yeah.
Fortunately, there was kind of an empty parking garage just half a block away.
Mr. Dugan.
I'm unfamiliar with the process that buildings go through. What kind of restrictions will any piece of the government here, committee, able to impose so that we don't end up with a storefront down below and then 3 stories of bare concrete with chain link fence?
Well, that's part of our review process. So, we work with developers to come up with the most logical and most appealing design of a building as much as we can. Typically what happens is when a developer approaches us with sort of a preliminary plans, here's what I'm thinking, here's what we're going to do, here's what makes sense for our economic standpoint, and we go back and forth. We give them a set of review comments that we gather from all departments. You got to modify this and that. Having fake windows on second, third, and fourth floor of a parking deck so that it looks, what typically is called a podium building. It's not going to work. We want something, more quality of a design, because the city really has shifted towards a quality design over just expediting the project review. So I think it goes back to what Commissioner Pigosi mentioned, is that by allowing the developer to not include this height in their height requirement, they have a little more flexibility how they design the building, and they can put parking sort of in the back and modify how the building is structured so that it probably looks more appealing, and maybe it's one of the additional tools that the developer can use to create a better looking building.
Right. To your point, a planned development gives the city a lot of leverage. If they don't like what the project looks like, it doesn't go forward. That's the end of it. But I do have another question on sort of a related matter. You take the Triangle property, 708 Church on the north end and the fountain in the south end. It's a triangular block. Under the downtown plan, it can go up to 385 feet, I think. And under the existing zoning, the D2 zoning, it's 125 feet. If somebody wants to put a building up in that block, what do you do?
I believe it was approved for 320
It
feet.
may very well have been.
35 stories.
It may very well have been, but you got the downtown plan saying it can go up to 385 feet, and you've got the existing zoning saying you can go up to 125 feet. What controls?
Well, that's what we talked about for the Maple Avenue project. The plan is a guideline. The zoning is the rule, the requirement. So keeping in mind the rule and the requirement, most developers still ask for height increases. And keeping in mind what the plan calls for, then the Plan Commission and the City Council and staff can sort of evaluate these projects, evaluate the standards, and see, does the project actually meet the guidelines of the plan? Is it consistent with surroundings?
How can it be a guideline when you've got a 200-foot disparity? How is that a guideline?
Well, I think what you're referring to is this sort of the draft changes to the zoning ordinance that were not actually adopted, but the plan generally speaks about higher density to be encouraged and allowed in the core. The number 385 was a draft proposal that ultimately did not pass the City Council, but the plan overall is a guideline that both staff, developers, Plan Commission, and City Council use to evaluate the projects.
Other questions, other comments? Do you want to pursue the issue of encouraging parking in the TRD area? Or do we want to come back to that?
Yeah, I want to pursue it because I think the mayor is right. It's its own separate. I mean, it's linked, but it is worthy of its own analysis. And so we can either vote this one up or down, or and hope that other one catches up.
And then once we come back to the question of overall parking requirements, then we might want to look at the parking at this provision as it affects the whole downtown core. That ought to cheer the staff up.
Right.
You ready for that?
What that parking, ultimately what the consultant is going to suggest is obviously going to be reduced parking requirement for TOD areas. And what that's going to be, I really don't know. Is it going to be based on the bedroom? Is it going to be based on, the unit size, square footage wise? Is it going to be, general sort of one-to-one? We'll see. But it's definitely going to be a reduction in the requirement. It's not going to be more. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. If there are no further questions or comments, does someone want to offer a motion?
May I say one more thing?
Okay.
I know I'm beating a dead horse, but to follow up on Ms. Feldman's comment, I would encourage the staff, and I know you're overworked. I know you are overworked. I mean that sincerely. To give the downtown plan some serious consideration, because there's a lot of good stuff in there. And right now I see it sitting on a radiator someplace collecting dust. End of sermon.
It seems to me, Stuart, that as we were considering the Maple Avenue project, there was a lot of discussion there about compatibility with the downtown plan, pro and con. And I think in that deliberation, we did give it pretty serious
Yes, we
attention.
did. Yes, we did. I think the principles that emerged from the downtown plan were, in fact, followed. I agree with the Maple project. I agree.
Okay. So we have some precedent. All right, somebody want to make a motion? Move to approve as staff recommendation?
Yes.
Pagotzi, second.
A second.
Delisle. Call roll.
We have a motion to approve. Commissioner Pigozzi?
Yes.
Commissioner Belisle?
Yes.
Commissioner Dubin?
Yes.
Commissioner Lewis?
Yes.
Commissioner Brown?
Yes.
Chairman Ford?
Yes. 6 ayes, no nays. The motion is approved. Thank you all. Thank you, staff. Let's see. Here's my agenda. We have no other business to come before us, do we? Do you have any catch-ups, updates?
We did not have a meeting in
Warnings.
August. We will have a meeting next month, which will probably be again in this room. Council chamber, we were kicked out of council chamber for something else more important. We should have, one thing is that we do have a zoning committee meeting next week on Wednesday. And that's going to be dealing with the text amendment about impervious surface. So we'll send out a packet on Friday. Chairman Ford mentioned about Megan Jones, our new neighborhood land use planner. She's excellent. She will be taking on my previous role as the Secretary of Commission. So you'll be getting a lot of emails from her. If you have any questions, I'm always available, but one of us can address them. I will be attending all the meetings anyway. Council will be there too to assist as needed. And there's really no updates on any of the previous projects that went through the Plan Commission, not that I remember. So.
Okay, thank you. Is there public comment on any other matters before us? The public says no. Okay, that being the case, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Lewis, seconded. Pagotzi. All in favor?
Aye.
I think we stand adjourned at 7:58. Thank you all.
Thank you. I don't know if I have